Have you ever felt too scared to speak because you didn't know the right English word? Do you want to learn English in a way that actually works? Not just in books, but in real life. Hello, my name's Olivia, and today I want to take you through something really personal. My journey of learning English, step by step. I didn't grow up speaking it fluently. I made mistakes. I stumbled over simple words. I even froze when someone asked me, "How's it going?" But I didn't quit. Instead, I followed a simple plan, one step at a time. And that plan, it completely changed my life. I still remember that cold, cloudy morning when everything changed. I had been living in Austin, Texas for only 2 weeks, and everything around me still felt like a giant maze. The street signs, the menus, the way people talked, it was like being dropped into the middle of a movie I wasn't prepared for. I had moved here with big dreams and shaky confidence. English was something I had studied in school, sure, but school English is like training wheels. When it came to the real world, I felt like I was stumbling around with no idea how to ride. Every time someone spoke to me, my brain panicked. My mouth locked up. I was scared of sounding dumb, scared of being judged, scared of saying something wrong. So most days, I just nodded, smiled, and hoped no one asked me anything. But that morning, I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the freezing wind. Maybe it was the loneliness. Or maybe I was just tired of holding my words inside. Whatever it was, I decided I was going to do it. I was going to speak English out loud. Not in my head, not in secret. Out loud, in public, for real. I walked into a cozy little diner just around the corner from my apartment. It smelled like pancakes and coffee. The waitress greeted me with a friendly, "Hi, how are you?" And I froze for a second, like always. My instinct was to just nod. But I didn't. I smiled, took a shaky breath, and said, "I'm good. 1 coffee, please. Medium. No milk." That's it. 7 words. 7 brave, wobbly little words. And you know what? She understood me. She smiled back and said, "Got it. 1 medium black coffee coming up." And I nearly cried, because for the first time since moving here, I felt seen. Not as someone who didn't belong, not as someone who was foreign, but as someone who was trying. And trying in that moment felt like enough. After that day, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to wait until my English was perfect. I wasn't going to wait until I sounded like a native speaker. I was going to use what I had, what I knew, and speak anyway, even if my sentences were short, even if my pronunciation was off, even if I made mistakes. So that became my mission. Every day, I challenged myself to speak English out loud, no matter how broken it sounded. At the grocery store, I asked, "Where is the rice?" At the bus stop, I said, "What time the bus come?" Was the grammar perfect? No. But did people understand me? Most of the time, yes. And when they didn't, I just smiled and tried again. I used my hands. I pointed. I laughed at myself. And most importantly, I didn't give up. In the beginning, I'd prepare simple phrases in my head before I left the house. I'd rehearse them quietly while brushing my teeth. "I want 1 sandwich." "How much is this?" "I don't understand. Can you repeat?" And I'd repeat them over and over until I felt brave enough to say them out loud. Sometimes I'd practice with Siri or Google Translate just to hear how the words sounded. I'd mimic the voice, practice the rhythm, and try again. I wasn't trying to sound American yet. I just wanted to sound like me, but in English. At home, I spoke to myself in English constantly, out loud, alone. I'd walk around my apartment and narrate everything I was doing like I was on a cooking show or a YouTube vlog. Now I am making tea. I will read my book. I need to buy eggs tomorrow. It might sound silly, but it worked. It trained my mouth to move in English. It made my voice stop shaking. And slowly, it made me feel like English wasn't some foreign thing I had to learn. It was something I was living. Sometimes I'd record myself talking about my day in English. Then I'd play it back and cringe at how I sounded. But I didn't let that stop me. Instead, I used it to improve. I'd listen to the parts where I stumbled, repeat them, and try again. It was like going to the gym before my mouth. The hardest part? Fighting the voice in my head that kept saying, "You sound stupid." That voice was cruel. It made me want to stay silent. But every time I pushed through it and spoke anyway, even one sentence, I got a little stronger, a little braver. And those small moments of bravery began to stack up. Eventually, I started speaking more confidently in real-life situations. Like at the pharmacy, when I needed cough syrup. I didn't know the right word, but I told the cashier, "My throat hurt. I need medicine for cough." And she helped me find exactly what I needed. Or when I went to the post office and said, "I want to send this to New York. How much?" And the lady at the counter smiled and said, "No problem. I'll help you." It's amazing how kind people can be when you just try. One of the biggest moments for me was at the laundromat. I was trying to figure out how the machines worked, and a woman next to me noticed I looked confused. She asked, "First time here?" And I said, "Yes, I'm not sure how to use." She laughed gently and said, "No worries, I'll show you." That turned into a 10-minute conversation about laundry, apartments, and where to get good tacos in the area. It wasn't deep, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. I was having a conversation in English with a stranger in America, and that's when it hit me. I was doing it. I was really learning English. Not just memorizing grammar rules, not just doing exercises in a notebook. I was living it, one sentence at a time. This step, starting with what I knew and speaking anyway, was the foundation for everything that came next. It gave me confidence, it gave me courage, and it taught me the most important lesson. Fluency isn't about speaking perfectly, it's about speaking anyway. Even when your voice shakes, even when you forget the word, even when people look at you funny. Because every time you speak, you grow. Every sentence is a small victory. And those small victories, they add up. One sentence turned into two turned into a 5-minute conversation, 5 minutes turned into a friendship. And slowly, I started to feel like I belonged. Not just in the country, but in the language. I still made mistakes. I still forgot words. But now, instead of panicking, I'd smile and say, "What's the word? The thing for putting stuff in the oven." And someone would say, "A baking tray?" And I'd laugh and say, "Yes, that." And just like that, I'd learn a new word in real time. By using what I already knew, by saying it out loud, by trusting that imperfect English was still real English, I broke down the wall that had kept me silent for so long. And that freedom, that daily practice, led me naturally to the next step. Because once I started speaking outside, I realized something big was missing. After that moment at the laundromat, something clicked deep inside me. I realized I was no longer just trying to speak English. I was actually living it in tiny moments. Those everyday conversations with waitresses, cashiers, people at the bus stop, they weren't just helping me survive in a new country. They were helping me build a new identity. But here's the thing. No matter how much I spoke outside, most of my time was still spent alone, at home. That's where I ate, cleaned, scrolled social media, watched movies, and just existed. If I only practiced English in public, I'd still spend 90% of my day not using it. That hit me hard. I knew that if I wanted real progress, if I wanted to go from surviving to thriving in English, I had to make the language part of everything I did, especially behind closed doors. So I made a bold decision. I would create an English world inside my own apartment. No more separating study time and real life. English would be everywhere, on my walls, in my ears, on my phone, and even in my thoughts. That was the only way I could build fluency that stuck, that grew, that didn't disappear the second I stepped outside. It started with simple changes. I went into my phone settings and switched everything to English. Menus, apps, notifications. At first, it was uncomfortable. I had to look up words like reminder, battery saver, and airplane mode. But every day, I got used to those terms. They stopped feeling foreign. They became part of my normal, just like hello and thank you. Then I went to my bookshelf. I removed the English grammar books that felt like school and replaced them with children's books and simple readers from the local library. I wasn't ashamed to start easy. I read The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Charlotte's Web, and even comic books. I underlined new words, practiced reading them out loud, and smiled at how good it felt to actually understand a whole page without needing a dictionary every sentence. The more I read, the more confident I became. My vocabulary started to grow naturally, without memorization. I wasn't just studying words, I was experiencing them. TV became my new classroom, but not in a passive way. I wasn't just watching shows, I was working with them. I chose American shows with natural, everyday dialogue, sitcoms like Friends, The Office, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. They were funny, real, and packed with useful phrases. I turn on English subtitles, pause the scene, repeat the line, then say it with the same tone and rhythm. I was mimicking not just the words, but the music of the language. The way characters said, "You gotta be kidding me," or "seriously?" stuck with me more than anything I read in textbooks. And after a few weeks, I started using those exact phrases in my own life. I'd be cooking dinner and say out loud, "Let's do this," before turning on the stove. I'd spill something and mutter, "Great, just great." I was using the language spontaneously, like it was mine. And it started to feel that way. Music helped me more than I expected. I made playlists of American songs, everything from pop to country to indie. I listened closely to the lyrics, sang along when I could, and even Googled song meanings to better understand the slang. I learned that hang in there means don't give up, that hit the road means to leave, and that cold shoulder has nothing to do with temperature. These idioms and phrases started to become part of my mental toolbox. They weren't just pretty lyrics, they were real language tools I could use in conversations. One of the biggest shifts came when I started thinking in English. At first, it felt forced. I had to translate everything in my head, and that took forever. But I pushed myself. When I got dressed in the morning, I think, okay, today I'll wear jeans and a blue hoodie. When I looked outside, I'd think, it looks cloudy. Maybe it will rain later. I didn't worry about being grammatically perfect in my thoughts. I just focused on training my brain to choose English first. Slowly, it became automatic. I no longer needed to translate. I could think and even dream in English. I also began journaling, just a few lines a night. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every night, I'd write something like, "Today I went to the store and talked to a new person. I learned a new word. Curious. I like that word. I want to speak more tomorrow." Reading back through those pages now makes me emotional because I see the journey. I see the girl who was scared to speak slowly becoming a woman who believed in her voice. And it all happened at home, one sentence at a time. Even my mirror became a practice buddy. I'd stand in front of it and pretend I was talking to someone at a coffee shop or giving directions. I'd say, "Hi, can I get a vanilla latte, please?" Or, "Yeah, just go down the street, take a left, it's on the right." I'd make eye contact with myself, try different facial expressions, practice saying things with emotion. It felt weird at first, but then it became empowering. I was practicing the real rhythm of conversation, the pauses, the reactions, and it helped me so much when I had to speak with real people. To keep myself accountable, I even made sticky notes and stuck them all over my apartment. On the fridge, "I am hungry." On the mirror, "You are learning English." On the light switch, "Turn on the light." On my door, "Have a good day." These little reminders made English feel alive, not like a school subject, but like a friend who lived with me. I didn't have to sit down and study for hours. I was learning passively just by being surrounded by the language. One thing I never expected to help me so much: talking to myself. Yep, out loud. I'd walk around the house narrating my actions like a YouTuber. "Okay, now I'm making breakfast. Scrambled eggs today. Let's see what we have in the fridge. Not much. I forgot to do laundry again." I wasn't trying to be entertaining. I was training my brain and my mouth to move together in English. And the more I did it, the more natural it felt. I also used social media, but with intention. I followed American content creators, vloggers, comedians, lifestyle influencers, and watched their stories every day. Not to copy their lives, but to study their speech, how they started sentences, how they reacted, how they told stories. I'd watch, pause, repeat, and practice. Some days I'd even record my own short videos, pretending I had followers, just to get comfortable speaking into the camera. That confidence carried into my real conversations, and I became less shy, more expressive. Every now and then, I'd talk to friends back home, and they'd ask, "Do you study every day?" And I'd laugh and say, "Not really. I just live in English now." That was the truth. English wasn't homework anymore. It was my air, my space, my soundtrack, my routine. And that shift from seeing it as a subject to seeing it as a lifestyle was the turning point. And then something amazing happened. One day I was cooking dinner and listening to a podcast in English. The host said a joke, and I laughed.
Not because I understood every word, but because I got the point. I felt the rhythm, the tone, the punchline, and I reacted in real time. No translation, no delay, just pure, natural understanding. That moment brought tears to my eyes. I thought, I'm really doing it. I'm living in this language now.
Of course, I still made mistakes. I still forgot words or mixed up tenses. But I didn't care. Because now I knew that progress happens at home, in the quiet hours, in the daily habits, in the effort no one sees. That's where fluency is born. Not in a classroom, not in a test, but in the ordinary moments of your day if you fill them with English.
And it was from that place, from the rhythm I built at home, from the comfort I created in my own space, that I felt ready for the next big leap. Because now I wasn't just talking to myself. I was ready to start talking with people, for real, in real conversations, in real life.
And that's where my journey leads next.
Making English part of my daily life at home gave me something I hadn't felt before: comfort. Not just comfort with vocabulary or comfort reading a menu, but comfort living in the language. English started becoming the voice in my head. It was in my fridge labels, in my mirror pep talks, in the music playing from my phone, in the Netflix shows I mimicked line by line. My world was slowly turning English, not just on the outside, but in the deepest corners of my daily life. I felt proud of that. I was building a foundation. But even with all that growth, there was still one part of the journey I had avoided: real conversations with real people, face to face. See, practicing at home was safe. It was private. I could pause, replay, rehearse, mess up, and no one saw it. But speaking to actual people out in the world, that was terrifying. Because now there were no subtitles, no room to re-record, no script to hold on to. Just me, my voice, and the fear of getting stuck. That fear was real. It made my heart race. It made my stomach twist. But deep down I knew, if I stayed in my comfort zone, I'd never truly grow. I had to take the English I was building in my quiet life and start using it in my loud one.
So I started small again. I didn't jump into long conversations right away. I didn't try to explain deep topics. I focused on the little moments that I used to run away from, like saying hello to my neighbors instead of just nodding. Asking simple questions like, "How's your day going?" Or, "Is that your dog? He's so cute." I practiced saying those lines in my head before I left my apartment. I rehearsed the rhythm, the intonation, and the first few times it felt awkward. My voice sounded unsure, my body stiff, but I said it anyway. And what surprised me most, people responded with kindness.
One of my neighbors, a sweet older woman named Carol, would always walk her dog past my building around the same time each morning. I had seen her a dozen times, but never had the courage to speak. One day, I smiled and said, "Good morning. Your dog is adorable." And her face lit up. She said, "Oh, thank you. This is Max. He's a spoiled little thing." Just like that, we were talking. A real conversation. I nodded, smiled, and added, "He looks very happy." It wasn't fancy, it wasn't deep, but it was real. And more importantly, it was mine. My English, my voice. From that day on, I challenged myself to have one real conversation every day. Just one. It could be with a cashier, a stranger in the elevator, someone in line at the store. At first, I prepared my lines. I'd plan my opener, something simple like,
"How long have you lived in this neighborhood? Do you know if this place has good coffee? Sorry, can you help me understand this?"
Sometimes people would respond quickly, and I wouldn't catch every word, but I didn't panic. I'd say, "Sorry, could you say that again?" Or, "A little slower, please." I stopped pretending to understand when I didn't. I started owning my learning process. And guess what? Most Americans didn't mind. In fact, they respected it. I remember one time at the farmer's market, I was trying to ask about a type of squash I had never seen before. I said, "What is this? I don't know the name." The seller chuckled and said, "That's spaghetti squash. You bake it and it turns into noodles." I smiled and said, "Oh, I want to try it." He gave me a simple recipe. We talked for 5 minutes. And I left not just with a squash, but with a sense of accomplishment. I started doing things I used to avoid just to practice. I joined the small language meetup at the public library. It wasn't big, just a circle of people sitting around talking about their day in English. The first time, I barely spoke. I was too nervous. My hands were sweating. I kept thinking, what if I say the wrong thing? What if they laugh? But they didn't. They listened, they nodded, they smiled. And when I did speak, even if it was just a sentence, they clapped. I felt seen, not for my mistakes, but for my effort. Little by little, I opened up. I started telling stories about my week, about funny things that happened, about things I missed from home. The more I spoke, the more I trusted my voice. I didn't memorize lines anymore. I responded naturally. I started using words I had only read, words like actually, honestly, frustrating, awesome. They rolled off my tongue because I had heard them in songs, shows, podcasts, and now they were mine. One moment I'll never forget happened in a bookstore. I was looking for a specific book and I couldn't find it. Normally, I just walk away. But that day, I asked the staff, "Hi, I'm looking for a book called The Alchemist. Do you have it?" The employee smiled, looked it up, and said, "Yeah, we've got a few copies over here." I followed him and then had the courage to ask, "Is it a good book? Have you read it?" He said, "Yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's simple but meaningful." We talked about the story for 5 minutes. I walked out of the store with a new book and a new level of confidence. I even started taking English into more casual settings. I'd go to cafes with my journal and try to start conversations with the barista or someone sitting nearby. If someone asked, "Are you a student?" I'd say, "I'm learning English, just writing and practicing." And that would often lead to questions like, "Where are you from?" or "How long have you been in the States?" Every conversation was different. Some were short, some lasted 30 minutes, but all of them gave me something priceless: experience. Not every conversation went smoothly. Sometimes I froze. Sometimes I misunderstood. Sometimes I had to ask 3 times before I caught the right word. But I never gave up. I kept showing up. And over time, the fear started to melt. The more I spoke, the less I worried about being judged. I started realizing something important. Most people aren't listening for perfection. They're listening to understand. And as long as I was honest, kind, and open, they were willing to meet me halfway. Eventually, I started volunteering at a local food drive. It was once a week, sorting boxes and handing out items. I did it partly to give back, but mostly to push myself into more conversations. And it worked. I met other volunteers, chatted while we worked, and laughed when we made mistakes. It wasn't a classroom, it was real life, and it was the best kind of practice I could have asked for.
One night, after a long day of helping at the food drive, I sat on my bed and realized something powerful. I don't just speak English now. I live in English.
I wasn't studying anymore. I wasn't pretending. I was connecting, feeling, laughing, growing.
And all because I had the courage to open my mouth, even when I was scared. Looking back, I think about the girl who stood frozen in that diner months ago, too nervous to order coffee. And now here I was, chatting with strangers, asking questions, even making jokes in English. It didn't happen overnight. It happened conversation by conversation, moment by moment. It was messy, awkward, and scary, but it was also beautiful. Because the truth is, you don't find confidence and then start speaking. You speak, and that's how you build confidence. And now, as I walk into a cafe or hop on a bus or join a group conversation, I don't feel like I'm learning English anymore. I feel like I'm simply living my life. In a new language, yes, but fully, honestly, and fearlessly.
And that's the most powerful step of all.